Uh, my dog isn't here today. Normally, if you've joined us before, you can sometimes hear him snoring in the background. So hopefully it should be a bit quieter this time today, where we're going to be talking about B2B marketing and how to kind of forge better connections with people today. So hopefully I'll be able to take you through some insights, give you some tips and ideas as well, which will help you guys. From like an understanding of what's needed, but like with all of these, I try to make sure that I include sort of practical elements that you can take away and kind of implement for yourselves too. Okay, we'll just give them 1 more minute till 3 past, which is what we normally do, and then we'll make a start. Just while we're waiting, just a reminder, I'll try to field as many questions as I can from people. If you think of things as we're going through, if you use at the top of your Teams, you've got the Q&A. If you click on that, you can add questions in there, and then what I'll do at the end is pick them up, or you can put them in the chat. And again, at the end, when we get to the Q&A section, I will be able to pick them up and answer as many as possible in the time. Okay, it is 13:03, so we'll make a start now on B2B marketing and cultivating more meaningful connections. So for those who don't know me or haven't been to one of these before, really hoping this is going to play ball. I'm Katie Horn. I am a fractional marketing director, and that just basically means that I offer my direction and advice and guidance to recruiters from all over the world. In fact, now we're working with people in Hong Kong and Dubai and China, and we come in and we help people plan and execute. We have a team that help execute as well. From my perspective, I've been working in marketing for over 20 years in a whole host of kind of sectors and industries, but more specifically working in just recruitment for the last sort of 9 years, 10 years nearly now. And in terms of experience, I've kind of worked for big corporations, so I've done things like TV, right down to kind of writing and executing my own marketing plans. So I've got experience in lots of different things. I like to think of myself as a really practical marketer. I don't think I'm really theorized. I definitely think I'm more boots on the ground and kind of getting your hands in and getting a bit mucky with stuff. So that's a bit about me. Let's see if this is playing ball now. Okay, so why is it important? And we're going to dive straight in. Why is it important to go beyond transactions when it comes to marketing, especially in a B2B environment? And for those who've been on these webinars before, you'll know I love a stat. So let's start with some stats. Okay, so customers are 3 times more likely to purchase from a brand that they feel a connection with. So, I think people have this misconception about building relationships and people buy from people only being in a B2C environment. That definitely isn't the case. It's still very much a prevalent kind of thing to follow through when you're thinking about your marketing, is that people want to feel that connection, and that connection with your brand, with your people, with your teams. So it is so important. Around 70% of B2B buyers say that how they are treated by a company really influences the product or service itself. And how they feel about them. So I think that kind of goes through not just to how we are perceived, but that if you think about the recruitment cycle, and you'll all know this, that candidates fall off when they feel like they've not received a good service, if the clients don't give feedback straight away. And we're really good at preaching that to our customers, but do we also kind of look at that internally and really look at like how do we manage our cycles internally of managing our customers' process and how they feel about us? Okay, some more stats to kind of whet your appetite. Around 72% of B2B buyers expect brands to understand their needs and challenges. And again, this goes back to some of the previous webinars where we've talked about building that customer avatar. If you haven't watched the webinar on that, do it. It's on the same link where you signed up for today, a little bit further down the page as the previous webinars. And I talk about this a lot in all of the webinars. It's all about understanding who your customers are, what their pains are, what their needs are, what their desires are. So, you know, that's a fantastic stat to say like 72% of B2B, not B2C customers expect you to really understand and know them. And it's much like us when we, you know everybody hates receiving something that feels so impersonal, and whether that be from like a business or a client B2C perspective. 83% of B2B buyers are more likely to do business with a company they feel emotionally connected to. And that goes down to that thing again of like the people buying from people. If you've forged a relationship with someone, you're more likely to be loyal and return to that customer or to that client or to that company to repurchase what it is that they're delivering. Something that we're going to come on to in a little while is about stories and storytelling. And there's a stat around that it's 22 more times more memorable to tell someone a story than it is to present them a fact. So again, I don't want to steal my thunder before we get to that part, and we're going to talk about that more, but just something to remember. And 70% of buying decisions are based on emotion in a B2B sector, and they use logic to justify that. So it's still very much down to that emotional connection and building that relationship and the importance behind that. Okay. If you can see me on the screen, I can't really see what screen you can see. I'm presuming the big screen is the presentation, but if you can see me and I'm looking off to the side, there isn't somebody else there. I've got the two screens running at the same time. Okay, so just to kind of, and again, something that I like to do is look at like misconceptions around the topic that we're talking about. So the first one that I definitely think people misunderstand is that understanding or appealing to someone emotionally is a form of manipulation. It definitely goes beyond manipulation. It isn't about manipulating somebody to make a decision or to take a choice. Emotional understanding and emotional relevance of content, etc., comes down to more about building that bond. And we'll talk a little bit more about like being authentic with things as we move forward. B2B decisions are based on logic only. Well, I've just presented a stat on that. That's another real misconception. You know, even in sectors that I've seen where people are very data driven or, you know, analytically minded, still that emotional and personal connection still is a huge factor in that decision making process. One size fits all isn't the case, and we've talked about this a lot about the customer avatars, really knowing who you're talking to, and then kind of personalizing content and materials and tone of voice and how you market to them people to suit each individual kind of avatar or sector that you've built. And success is instant. Building this properly will take time. And you know, and I'll talk about some practical examples a bit further on. And one thing that I always say to people is, if you know, everybody would like the world, but you're not going to achieve that in a day. So start small and build up to it. You know, what personalization could you start with? What tags have you got? What ways could you show more personalization? And just remember that success isn't instant. Nothing in marketing happens overnight. And I think that's a really key message that I'm keen to kind of make sure that is out there to help the marketeers in this industry. Okay, so when we start to look at about how do you build those connections, there's kind of a lot of different elements that go into building a connection. And I started to look at like, what do I think helps build strong relationships? And there's some kind of key elements in there. So the first being empathy. And I'm going to cover the majority of these off, or all of these off, as we go through. Authenticity is key. personalized content out the back of all of this, producing useful resources, and that goes hand in hand with that personalized content, and interactive content as well. And it goes back to that thing that I touched on earlier about storytelling. And creating memorable stories that people will associate with your brand. And all of that combined will go to creating stronger relationships for you and your customers within that B2B environment. You're going to click for me. Here we go. Okay, so we'll look at the first one, which is all around creating empathy. So showing understanding of your customers. So, and again, we touched on this a few times now. I know we certainly did in the Avatar. We talked about it in the Aligning Sales and Marketing webinar that we did as well. But it's definitely about going beyond the demographics. So, could you be doing research around goals, frustrations, aspirations? I watch a lot of webinars like this. I read a lot of stuff. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I saw a talk about how candidates were becoming more value-based and wanting recruiters to focus on like their values and beliefs and then matching them with the companies. And again, it's almost like you need to take that information and reverse it to look at like that's how your customers also want to be treated. They want to see that you are understanding what it is that they're looking for outside just that initial kind of job description or role that they need to fill. So you need to start thinking about like what kind of challenges do they face? Is there a shortage of that specialist area? What kind of headache does that create for them? How do you kind of help that? And then you can use like active listening. So this is where you start to look at like social. So there are plenty of tools out there for active listening on social. So you can put in keywords and it will flag up like people talking about this kind of stuff. That's a great way to kind of socially actively listen. You can do surveys. You can do direct interactions. So, a lot of recruiters will do things like they'll set up a LinkedIn connection request, and it might be if they're going into a new market to kind of ask people to give them 10 minutes of their time so they can undertake some research and understand these frustrations and, and aspirations of that new market. And that's a great way to kind of start to build that customer avatar to allow you to have that empathy and understand what it is that they're trying to achieve. And then what you can do from that is start to segment your audience. So you can tailor the information based on the different roles, the industries, the buyer stages. So it's all about kind of planning out that customer journey, looking at your avatars, where they sit, where the opportunities are that you can interact in a meaningful way with them. Hoping this will work. Okay. So first of all, it's creating that understanding and gathering that information, and then it's about acknowledging it. So this is where you start to talk about like validating people's struggles. So understanding and recognizing those industry specific obstacles, for instance, or common pain points that they'll be facing. You can speak their language. So, you can adapt the tone and the way that you speak to these people depending on where they are in the funnel or where they are in terms of frustrations. You would speak very differently to somebody who's been trying to recruit a role for the last 6 months than somebody that's new to market, say like an internal recruiter that's recruiting 50 roles, and you're going to help them with one specific area. You would speak to them very differently than you would to some hiring manager who's been trying to fill a role for 6 months. And so it's about adapting your voice, about adapting how you acknowledge what their frustrations are, and offering solutions, not just talking about features of what you deliver, but how it makes their life better, how it specifically deals with that challenge or that frustration or that obstacle that they have, to make their life easier by utilizing your services or product. And then I've just tried to think about, like I always do, try to think of like how I would practically put that in and give you some examples. So, for instance, from a candidate perspective, you might look at people who are job seeking, and you might have different content dependent on where they are in that funnel. So have they just started their search? Are they not even yet realizing that they're ready to do that search? So you may have content built around the different stages of that funnel. You may also personalize that content depending on what level they are. You know, a VP versus an engineer. You might have different tailored content for those specific kind of candidates. You might offer a career progression discussion. So somebody that isn't necessarily looking for a role, but you know, and you've identified that person as a person of interest to you. So it might be talking about career progression, sorry, losing my words, and how you can help them in their career. It might be a webinar that you run or some videos that you pre-record, training on, you know, interview tips, things like if you're working in a contractor market and you're trying to get perm people to move over to contractor, you think about like what their objections are, what their worries are. You could create content around that specifically. So it could be a webinar that you run once a month on what you'd need to know about moving from perm to contract. And then you send that out as invites. You're gathering that data of people who are interested, who go to attend that. That creates you a talent pool of people who you can then identify where they are in that market and where they sit in that funnel, and you can create personalized content for them from that perspective. When it comes to clients, you can look at things like industry salary mapping or candidate mapping. So again, it's things that you can offer them. So if they're struggling to fill a role and they haven't found anyone for 6 months, is it because the salary's wrong? Is it because they're looking in the wrong places? Do they need to adapt? Are they meeting what people want within that industry? So it could be like a map against what they're offering and what people want. So it just personalize that content back to them. You could do webinars on sourcing talent beyond a job description. So, you know, looking at how Gen Zs and what they're looking for and why their requirements from a job perspective and how they look differently at finding a job versus baby boomers or millennials. So think about who they're trying to attract, what their problems are, and again, it's about creating some practical examples, and then a Q&A on using contractors. So if you've got perm people and customers looking for perm, is it that you need to start talking to them about using contractors? Why have they got a fear of using contractors? And is there something you could put together to help them overcome that? I am conscious of time, so I'll speed up a little bit. If I go too fast, if you raise your hand. So then we look at transparency and authenticity. I had real trouble saying that word earlier. I no idea why. So it's really important for you as a business to show transparency and authenticity. So a great way of looking at this is doing things like sharing really human stories. So employee testimonials, customer success stories, behind the scene glimpses, about, if you think of it like showing your human side to the business, be open and honest, acknowledge shortcomings, address concerns. You know, one of the best things that I've seen recently is one company I saw, it was not a recruiter, but they did a Q&A that they were sharing on LinkedIn, and it was all the objections that people might have about using their services, and they'd actually really openly addressed these issues. You know, there's no reason why you couldn't upfront address some of these issues. So if you're having trouble getting through to people and you know the reason is because of these issues, then is that an area that you can help kind of overcome that fear or overcome that barrier? And celebrate achievements, milestones, community impact, or employees. Like, what have they done? Has somebody got a promotion? Has somebody got married? You know, pick and choose. I'm not saying put everything out there on your company LinkedIn page, but it is important to show a human side to the business. the same with sharing your stories of shortcomings. There's been a few people that have shared kind of like really truthful updates on LinkedIn, and you see it yourselves. There's a real kind of element of some people love it, some people hate it. So you do always run the risk a little bit. So my advice is always to try and err on the side of caution a little bit, depending on how you want your business to be perceived. And some practical examples of that, which I think will work really well, and I can't spell today. Sharing honest stories about your journey. So it could be, you know, did the business grow? What obstacles did you face as you grew? These may be things that resonate with your clients or candidates or, you know, people in the industry. Showcase employee voices. I really love this one. I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but Facebook are doing this loads at the minute. So they showcase like employees that work there. They show their pets, and you know, I think they've had so much bad press lately, that they are trying to create a more human element to the business. And you'll start to see this a lot with like much bigger organizations and trying to kind of bring in that human element and create these better relationships. Live your brand values. How do you actually engage with the community? If you talk about wanting to be part of a community and, you know, you want to help achieve like a greener environment or whatever it is, how are you actually doing that? What are you actually doing? Don't just pay lip service to something, like really live your brand values. Is your brand value something that you wrote yourself when you started the business? Is it something that the team have bought into? Do you sit and go through these with your team on a regular basis? Have you updated them with your team? You know, is everybody in that business buying into these brand values? Or is it just something that somebody wrote or a branding agency wrote for you 5 years ago that you've kind of kept stuck on a wall somewhere? And so I think this is a really key one, and perhaps we'll do a session around this and we'll get kind of like a brand values person in to talk about this. But I think that's really key, is like practicing what you preach. So living your brand values and really kind of putting yourself out there. Not rage user content, but use user content, user generated content. This is a brilliant way. If you could get it so that you were using customer content or partners to share their experiences, so that might be like doing video testimonials or getting them to produce something and you put it on there. Another way I've seen of doing this has been like a really nice thing of blogs. So industry expert blogs. You know, have you got a candidate that you want to showcase? Could they write a blog for you or an article or a white paper? Like, use other people's content. It just, again, will help build that authentic voice within the industry. It also helps because it's not authored by you. So if it's a specific topic, then it can put a bit more kind of weight behind it. And I did say I'd cover this off, which was storytelling. So storytelling cuts through the noise. It helps build trust, and it can make something really complex into an understandable kind of story, and it can create more humanization to things, which will ultimately lead to more loyalty and growth. Okay, so I think this was a really important one to talk about, like practical examples of how you can use storytelling. So, for instance, if we look at the typical thing that people do is share a testimonial, and it can be quite flat. You know, it will be like, Mark said Katie did a brilliant job and everybody loved her. And I might share that as a graphic on my LinkedIn, and that's great. You know, it definitely gives you an element of social proof, but how much better would it be if I was sharing more of a case study? And it doesn't have to be a 16-page, you know, case study, but if you can talk about how it solved some of the challenges that your customers are facing, can you see how that will resonate more? It will start to answer in their minds them objections. It will start to kind of give them a bit more of a three-dimensional picture of how they can use your services and what will make it create more brand loyalty from your perspective. So that is a difference between kind of a testimonial and a story. So a case study is more of a story. Other examples of storytelling, so challenges, so focusing on human elements, so you can focus on things like emotional struggles. So for instance, when you're talking about contracting or moving to contracting, start to think about like what challenges emotionally do people face. Well, it's that worry of moving away from like a guaranteed income each month. Where do I pick up my next piece of work? Who's going to support me? How do I understand about like tax and things like that? So you can focus on that emotional, and imagine if you were telling that story of how somebody had all of these emotional worries and this is how you solved them. Again, it just starts to resonate a little bit more than just kind of this is what contractors get, this is what a perm person gets. And you, as recruiters, we tend to have a wide range or a wide spectrum of roles to choose from. So you can showcase lots of different elements in this. You could share your story, why you started the business or why you started in marketing, or give some story elements to your journey. Showcase your culture being lived by the team. So again, it could be a story about how you revised your brand values to make them more about the new team that you've got there now and how they're delivering that, what they're doing, how they bring that into their lives. And then showcasing your data in a what does that mean for me way. So for instance, industry trends, if you were to add comments from clients or candidates into that to translate that stat into an understandable story and how that helps that person, is going to go a lot further than just a stat on a page. Okay, so then I was trying to think about like just personalization in general and ways that you can create more personalized content to help you when it comes to building these longer relationships. And so the first thing I put up there is just about segmenting your customers, and that's really key behind all of this. And I've talked, and I feel like I really go on about this all the time, but like the customer avatar and tagging of your database is key to any of this. And then another great thing that you need to try and factor in is how your team access this content. So how are you going to store it? How's it going to be tagged? So that if they're speaking to someone, they can easily go, oh, this person's objection is X. Oh, actually, we've got a PDF that I'm going to send you, which might really help you. Or we've got a video that I think would be really beneficial to you. Just kind of think that through to make sure that it's easily accessible to everybody. And that goes back to that kind of marketing Bible and how they can use the stuff that you're producing. Customer surveys and feedback is a great way to kind of help build that customer picture and personalized content. So if they come back and they say, we really love this about your business, or we'd like to see more of this, that is a great way for you to then start producing that content. Polls, Q&As are really good. Webinars, user-generated content, and building online groups and forums is a really great way to build that relationship. And I'm going to come on to that. I've just got one slide in about that, and communities. In-person events are starting to make a massive comeback. I don't know about you guys, but I've been to like 3 conferences already this year, and they've been absolutely packed. I think there is, within industries, there's been a real kind of move to have these in-person conferences. A lot of industries, they're kind of like the pivotal points. And it's even for industries that you wouldn't expect, like I was watching a webinar on AI yesterday, and they were saying about that now in America, like that is the pivotal point. of the year is this AI conference. So anybody working in that, they're all about getting to this conference, and everything's built around that. So don't disregard them as being kind of nonsensical. Client communities, free resources. So what can you give away for free? Training, what can you offer? If you work with lots of internal recruitment teams, when they've got a new person starting, could you just put together a bit of an industry kind of video around like why it's different recruiting in your industry? If that was something that they would share internally, or a fact sheet or something, if they would share that to every new starter in that team internally, they're already going to be thinking of you as the people that they go to. So it's thinking outside the box of like how you can help train and develop and the headaches that these people have. Celebrating client success and celebrating candidate success is really key. And I think that's, people have like a fear of sharing client names, obviously candidate names as well. But is there ways that you can anonymize them? Is there ways that you could just share it with like a specific group? To just share in that success, I think is a really nice thing to do. And it definitely helps build loyalty. And one thing that I just wanted to touch on was just on communities, because it's something I get asked about a lot, that people have the great idea, and I think it is a fantastic idea to build communities. 78% of B2B marketers agree that building communities leads to deeper relationships with customers. And I almost want to put like a cautionary note on this before everybody runs off and decides to set up a LinkedIn group, is that you need to be mindful of having clarity and purpose to the group. So what is it you're trying to achieve? What is the group itself trying to achieve? Being really clear about that. Because you've got things like, would you let other recruiters in? Is it just going to be for putting jobs in? If it is, you're going to lose people really quickly. And then you need to consider like the engagement in that group as well. It is a lot of work to create and maintain a community. If you look at some of the most successful ones, they have community managers, and their sole role is just to build and flourish that community. So, it isn't something that, you could take lightly. And then you've got to think about like moderation, support, even down to things like when somebody requests to join, sending them a personal message and finding out more about them. Do you need to vet these people when they apply to join? How are you going to get people to join? What are you going to do to encourage? Have you got the right person to run the group internally? And then you need to think about like how you can sustain and grow that group moving forward. So again, that comes down to kind of looking at how you can attract people in, and then how you're going to keep them engaged, what you're going to do, and then how you're going to kind of grow that and maintain moving forward. So please don't think that I'm saying don't do this, because I'd love everybody to build their kind of talent or client communities, but just be really mindful that you need to make sure, like with anything that you do in marketing, it needs to be well planned and thought through. Okay, so my key words of wisdoms or takeouts for today: build your customer avatars, include as many people in this kind of building as possible. Because your team and your consultants are the people who really speak to the candidates and clients on a day-to-day basis. So the more info we can get from them to help us build the objections from a marketing perspective will help us massively. So, don't expect your marketeer to be able to go away and do all of this. They need your help and support. They need your input. Get your tags right and plan for new tags. So get your database tagged properly, plan ahead. So are you adding more tags? What are they going to be used for? If you're running a campaign and people are putting their heads above the parapets, how are you tagging the fact that they've done that? How is that feeding back into your CRM system? What are you doing with it? is it setting up another funnel? We talked about funnels last time. If you missed that one, I think it's the last webinar that we did. We talked about funnels and automations. That's, again, it's on the landing page if people want to go back and watch that. Be realistic about what you can achieve. Start small and build is my advice for anything marketing wise. You know, don't go in and think that you're going to set up 500 funnels or that you're going to create all of this personalized content overnight, because it just won't happen. There's not enough hours in the day. So it's about prioritizing what's important to get it right. And sometimes that can be undertaking a big project of tagging people or doing research to get the right tags in place. So, you know, it can seem like it's a long-winded process, but ultimately it will lead to better deliverability of your emails, especially with that new Google rules that have come in and that have started now. I don't know if everybody's seen, you now have to have authenticated your domains, so it probably meant adding some extra records to your DNS and things like that. If you haven't spoke to your IT providers about that, make sure you do it, and I'll come on to that shortly. Don't be afraid to ask people for their preferences. It can help you segment and clean your data. So, you know, it might be undertaking a campaign where you go out and actively ask people, like, what kind of information do you want to hear about from us? What's of interest to you? It will help you segment your data. And yes, you will get people that unsubscribe, but ultimately, are then people really interested in what you've got to say? Are you better to start with a pool of people who are, as that is going to be your lowest hanging fruit, which will get you across the line quicker. Be authentic and tell stories. Don't just present figures, because everybody wants the human element. Okay. So, shameless plug, I have to put this in, but if anybody needs any help with their marketing planning, and we offer planning, we offer mentoring and planning. If you have an in-house marketing person who just needs a bit of direction and support, and we also offer board level strategic planning and mentoring. If you're a owner manager, then that one can work really well for you, because we can actually help with some of the delivery too. We also offer a one-to-one. So when you receive the slides and the video from today, there'll also be a link in there for a Teams. You can set up a chat with me. I'm happy to do a chat, even if it's just to chew the fat on marketing. I'm more than happy. If you've got something that you're thinking about doing that you kind of want to run past somebody, I'm always happy to give some input on that. I will come on to Q&A. Just one thing that I just wanted to talk about was some exciting news. Well, exciting for me because I love this kind of stuff. But the next webinar, we're actually going to move to a Wednesday. And there's a good reason for that, is that I've managed to secure Force 24, Adam Oldfield. He's going to come on and he's going to do a Q&A session with me all around the new Google rules for email deliverability. So that will be a really good one. So if you've got any questions, you've all got my email, you can reply to the message that comes out. I'm going to be putting a whole list of questions together to ask him as well. And I'm pretty sure I'll cover off most of the things that you guys would think of. But that should be a really good one. And then in a month after that, so there'll be more internal ones, which are just me, unfortunately, but then after that as well, we've secured Neil Kemp, who's going to be coming on to talk about practical advice for creating videos. Everybody's talking about video content and how important it is, and I love videos. And so we're going to be running a session with Neil where we are basically going to be talking about practical examples, just things like what's the best camera angle? Like, if I've got £100 to invest, should it be in a microphone or a camera or a tripod? Where would you spend £100? Questions like that, like really, really practical, kind of boots on the ground. This is how we're going to do it. So I'm really excited about those two sessions, as you can tell in my voice. And that brings us to a close, unless people have any questions. I've got the Q&A open. Hopefully I didn't talk too quickly today. I know I get a little bit enthusiastic about marketing, and so it comes across as me talking really fast. Okay, there's not any questions. I try to keep them to about 45 minutes max, so that people can kind of get away. Nothing. Oh, we've just had someone join. I think that was Andrew who just joined. Sorry, we're at the end of the session, but because you're on the list, you will get the recording when that's sent round. Other than that, I think we're good. So we'll send all the info on the next webinars that will be taking place. I'm really looking forward to that Force 24 one because I think it'll be really interesting about like what the Google rules are for email. So definitely don't miss that one. And thanks for all attending today. All right, take care. Bye.